I used to think dreams had expiration dates. Mine sat quietly in the room at the top of the stairs, collecting dust between unfulfilled promises and grocery lists. That room, small, square, with a single window that let in the morning light like a secret, had once been my sanctuary. Before Dylan. Before the years started ticking by like the clatter of dishes in a kitchen sink. Before I became someone's mother, before I could ever become myself. It wasn't that I regretted it. Not for a second. Dylan had come into my life like spring rain, unplanned, overwhelming, beautiful. I gave everything to raising him. Every hour of sleep. Every cent I might have spent on a canvas or a set of brushes. I told myself the art could wait. But dreams are strange things. They don't die. They wait. Patiently. Quietly. And then one day, you walk past the door at the top of the stairs and feel the pull again. That subtle ache just beneath the ribs. Now that Dylan was grown, 20, independent, taller than me with that lazy grin of his father's, I found myself climbing those stairs more often. The door creaked in that familiar way, like an old friend clearing its throat. Inside, the room was the same. My easel still stood by the window, my paints in their chipped wooden box, still smelling faintly of turpentine and longing. I started small. A few sketches. A sunrise. A memory. But soon, I was losing hours up there. Whole afternoons swallowed by brushstrokes and silence. I never told Dylan. He knew I liked to be alone sometimes, but I never said what for. Maybe I was afraid he'd laugh. Or worse, encourage me. Sometimes it's easier to carry a quiet yearning than to hold hope in your hands and feel how delicate it truly is. But he noticed, of course. He always noticed more than he let on. He started pausing outside my door. I'd hear the soft creak of the floorboard, the hush of his steps retreating. Once, I left the door slightly ajar without meaning to. I came back from the kitchen to find him gone, but something was different. My newest painting, an abstract piece I hadn't quite finished, had been shifted slightly. Just enough to suggest it had been studied. Maybe even admired. I said nothing. Neither did he. Then one evening, over dinner, he said casually, "There's an exhibit downtown on Saturday. A new artist. Thought maybe we could go together." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to go to an art exhibit with your mother?" He shrugged. "Why not?" I smiled. It was so rare for him to ask me for time these days. Between his part-time job and classes, he was usually too busy or too tired. Saturday came. He drove us. I still didn't know the name of the artist. The gallery was intimate. Soft lighting, white walls. There were at least 30 paintings on display, each of them a window into my soul. It took me a moment. No, more than a moment. My breath caught before I realized what I was looking at. They were mine. Every single one. That soft landscape I had painted last spring, the portrait I never meant to finish, the piece I started the night I couldn't sleep because the rain reminded me of being young. All of them. Framed. Titled. Hung with such care it made my eyes sting. I turned to Dylan. He was watching me, a small, uncertain smile tugging at his lips. "Do you like it?" he asked. I don't understand," I whispered. "How?" "I saw your work." I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. "I asked Julian. You remember Julian? From high school. He curates shows now. I asked if he'd take a look. He said it deserved to be seen." I pressed a hand to my mouth. Tears blurred my vision. I felt years of quiet disappear in a single exhale. People were walking by the paintings, murmuring softly. "Beautiful. Powerful. Who is she?" They didn't know I was standing right beside them. That their words were filling in the cracks of something long abandoned. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the room at the top of the stairs and painted until the sun began to rise. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Alive. Dylan came by in the morning, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed me one, then sat on the floor like he used to as a little boy, staring at the unfinished painting on my easel. "You really think I'm good?" I asked him quietly. He looked up. "I think you're brilliant, Mom." And maybe it was the way he said it, no hesitation, no patronizing smile, just that steady certainty in his voice, but I believed him. For the first time, I believed in myself. The weeks after the exhibition passed in a warm haze. I received emails, phone calls, even a few personal letters from people who'd attended the gallery opening. Some asked to purchase pieces. Others wanted commissions. A woman from New York sent me a check, more than I'd earned in a single month at my old job, for a painting I had nearly thrown away. It felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Someone freer, braver. But the truth was, I had simply stepped into my own. The version of me I'd left behind when Dylan was born. The version I had folded up and tucked inside quiet moments and dusty brushes. Dylan came home earlier now. We started having dinner together more often, falling into a rhythm that we hadn't shared since he was in high school. He'd ask about my art like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes he'd bring me articles, artist profiles, little things he thought I'd enjoy. We talked about everything and nothing. And then there were the silences. The ones that weren't uncomfortable, but weren't quite easy either. They filled the air between us like a low hum, like music you can't quite hear but still feel. I noticed the way he looked at me really looked. There was something in his gaze that felt different. Not like a son watching his mother. More like a man seeing a woman for the first time. And God help me, I didn't turn away. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That I had spent too many years alone, too many nights wrapped in longing, too many mornings with only the echo of routine. But it was there. In the way his voice softened when he asked if I was sleeping well. The way he stood too close in the kitchen, brushing against my arm as if by accident. The way his eyes lingered when I wore the blue dress he had once said made me look like someone who could own the whole room. One evening, after I had finished a painting that had nearly undone me, something bold, abstract, chaotic, I stood in front of it for a long time, breathless. Dylan walked in quietly and stopped behind me. "You made that today?" he asked, his voice hushed. I nodded, not turning around. It came out of nowhere, like it had been waiting. He moved closer. It's raw, like a storm. I felt the heat of him behind me. His presence seemed to press against the back of my neck. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. Something in me, something I didn't dare name, held me still. "You ever wonder," he said after a moment, "what you might have done with your life if things had been different?" I smiled, small and tired. Every day. I turned then, slowly, to look at him. His face was so close. There was something in his eyes, curiosity, admiration, maybe even reverence. It shook me to my core. "I don't regret anything," I whispered, unsure who I was trying to convince. "I had you." His expression shifted. "But did you ever want more?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not with words. He reached up, fingers brushing a smear of paint on my cheek. "You have something here." My breath caught. It was such a simple gesture. Innocent, perhaps. But it wasn't the touch that undid me, it was the pause afterward. The way he looked at me like he was waiting for something. A signal. A surrender. I stepped back then, heart pounding. "I should clean up," I said quickly, moving past him. I didn't wait to see if he followed. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the way his fingers had lingered just a second too long. The way he'd looked at me, not like a boy, not like my son, but like a man seeing something he wanted and wasn't sure if he should. And worse, I couldn't stop thinking about the way I had wanted to let him. What was wrong with me? I was his mother. But something inside me had begun to stir. Something long buried and unnamed. Not lust, no, it was too soft for that. It was yearning. That quiet, dangerous ache to be seen again. To be known. Not as a mother or a caregiver or a fixture in someone else's life, but as a woman. The next morning, I found Dylan in the kitchen, making coffee. He smiled at me, casual, like nothing had changed. Maybe it hadn't. Or maybe we were both pretending it hadn't. "I was thinking," he said, "we should take a trip." "A trip?" He nodded. "To the coast." "You haven't taken a real vacation in, ever, have you?" I blinked. "Why now?" He shrugged, smiling into his mug. "Because you're finally living for yourself. And I want to see what that looks like. Besides," he added, softer, "you deserve to be somewhere beautiful." Somewhere beautiful. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him, this young man I had raised, who now stood taller than me, who spoke with such warmth it undid me. I should have said no. I should have drawn the line. But all I said was, "Okay." The house we rented on the coast sat high on a cliff, watching the ocean the way a lighthouse might, vigilant, lonely, necessary. Dylan found it online and booked it before I could even say yes. When we arrived, I stood in the driveway, stunned by the wind, the pale sunlight, the way the sea seemed to call directly to the center of my chest. "It's yours for a few days," he said, tossing me the keys. "No chores. No noise. Just you and the ocean." "And you," I added, only half teasing. He smiled faintly. "If you want me." The words should have made me laugh, but they didn't. They settled quietly into the spaces between us, like so many others had lately. Inside, the house was all glass and warm wood, as if someone had dreamed it into being. A long hallway led to 2 bedrooms, one overlooking the ocean, the other tucked away behind the kitchen. I took the ocean view without hesitation. I needed it, that vastness, that illusion of being small again. That first night, we walked along the beach just as the sky turned to honey and bruised plum. I wore an old cardigan, paint still dried into the cuffs, and he walked beside me with his hands in his pockets, his hair messy from the wind. "I remember when you used to bring me to the lake in the summers," he said, kicking a rock. "You'd pack peanut butter sandwiches and those little apple juice boxes." I laughed softly. "And you'd always fall asleep halfway through our picnic." "Yeah, but I always woke up to you sketching something. A tree. My shoes. The shoreline." We walked in silence for a while after that. Then he said, "You looked beautiful then. But you look more alive now." The words hit like a sudden shift in tide. I stopped walking. "Dylan." He looked at me, his face open, unreadable. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't say that. I don't want you to be uncomfortable." I searched his expression, looking for a crack, some sign he was joking, or testing, or teasing. But it wasn't there. "You haven't made me uncomfortable," I said, voice low. "You've just made me confused." He stepped closer, hesitant. The sky behind him darkened to deep violet, and the wind curled around us like a sigh. "I don't know what this is," he murmured. "But I feel it, and I think you do too." I wanted to deny it, to say the right thing. But my body betrayed me, heart racing, breath caught, warmth rising to my cheeks like sunlight through fog. "Let's not do this," I whispered. "Let's just go back. Let it be a good trip." He didn't argue, didn't press. He simply nodded, and we turned back toward the house in silence. That night, I lay in bed with the windows open, the sound of the ocean crashing like thoughts I couldn't silence. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a world where the lines between right and wrong were clean and easy, where I could still look at him and only see my son. But I wasn't sure that world existed anymore. The next morning, I found him sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, the steam rising like ghosts between us. He looked tired, but calm, and when he glanced up at me, there was no regret in his eyes. "Want some?" he asked, holding out the second mug. I sat beside him, the blanket from my bed draped around my shoulders. We stared at the sea for a long time before either of us spoke. "I had dreams once," I said softly. "Big ones. About gallery shows in New York. About people calling me an artist without irony." He turned toward me, waiting. "And I let them go. Because of you. And I never regretted that. Not ever." "I know. But now," I faltered. "Now you're here. Supporting me. Seeing me. And it's like something old and hungry is waking up." His jaw tensed slightly. "You're not alone in that." I looked at him then, really looked. He was not a boy anymore. He hadn't been for some time. But he was still mine. And yet, something inside me stirred that had nothing to do with parenting and everything to do with being seen again. Desired. Wanted. "Last night," he said carefully, "when I told you you were beautiful. I didn't mean it as a son." I nodded. "I know." His hand was close to mine on the armrest. Just a few inches. A breath. My fingers inched toward his without me realizing. When they touched just barely, it was like a spark leapt between our skin. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. And when I turned my head to look at him, he was already watching me. His eyes searching, his lips parted slightly, as if waiting. He leaned in. So did I. The kiss was slow, hesitant. A question. Then it deepened. And we were no longer pretending. We didn't speak after the kiss. Not at first. We sat in the hush that followed, our foreheads nearly touching, both of us suspended in the breath between what we had done and what it meant. The ocean below kept moving, constant and uncaring, but inside me the world had changed. I stood slowly and walked inside without looking back. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in the same blanket I'd worn on the porch, listening to the distant sound of the waves, the creak of the house as it settled, the thunder of my own thoughts. What had I done? What had we done? Every part of me felt fractured. Some pieces glowing with warmth, others burning with shame. But the worst part, the most terrifying part, wasn't the guilt. It was the way I couldn't stop touching my lips, still remembering his kiss. By morning, I expected everything to unravel, for the weight of reality to crush whatever strange thread had bound us the night before. But it didn't. When I walked into the kitchen, Dylan was already making breakfast. His shoulders were tense, his hair a mess, his entire body radiating caution. When he turned, he looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to apologize or confess something more. "I made coffee," he said, carefully neutral. I nodded, stepping to the counter, letting the scent steady me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was tender, guarded. A silence filled with what we didn't yet know how to say. Finally, he set down the spatula and faced me. "I don't want to hurt you. You haven't." He hesitated. "I don't want you to regret it." I closed my eyes. "I already do. And I don't. It's both at once, and I don't know what to do with that." He stepped closer, but not too close. "Tell me what you need from me." I turned to him, tears stinging behind my eyes, not because of him, but because of the war inside me. Because for the first time in decades, someone had asked me that question with full sincerity. Not what I could give, or manage, or sacrifice, but what I needed. And I didn't know the answer. "I don't know," I said softly. "That's okay," he replied, just as softly. "We'll figure it out." We didn't touch again that morning. We sat side by side on the porch, eating eggs and toast as if the sky hadn't shifted the night before. But every glance held echoes of something tender. Something dangerous. Something real. Back home, things didn't settle so much as change shape. I returned to the room at the top of the stairs, but it was no longer just a retreat. It was a promise. I painted with fever now pieces that frightened me, challenged me, set me free. Dylan helped where he could, carrying canvases, photographing work, reaching out to clients when I didn't know how to price myself. He never asked for anything in return. Never pushed. But he lingered. He'd brush a hand against mine when passing a paint jar. Sit a little too close when showing me gallery inquiries. He would stare, unapologetically, when I was caught in my process, wild-haired and focused, paint streaked across my cheek. It wasn't mother and son anymore. Not quite. It was something else. And yet, somehow, still us. Then came the second kiss. It happened late one night. I had finished a commission, a surreal stormscape that had wrung me dry, and wandered downstairs barefoot, exhausted. Dylan was in the kitchen, back turned, lit only by the golden haze of the stove light. "You're still up," I said quietly. He turned, eyes immediately scanning my face. "Couldn't sleep." I nodded. "Me neither." He reached for a glass and filled it with water. I stepped forward to take it, but when our hands met, we both froze. His thumb brushed against mine. He didn't let go. This time, I didn't step back. I moved forward, close enough to feel the heat from his skin. My breath caught in my throat, and before I could speak, his lips were on mine. This kiss was nothing like the first. It was deeper, bolder, hungrier. His hands found my waist, mine clutched the front of his shirt, and somewhere between the hush of the fridge and the low hum of the night, the world disappeared again. We stopped before it went too far. We always stopped. But the storm had already arrived. Inside us, we talked, finally, in the days that followed. About what it meant. About what it couldn't mean. About guilt and choice and the terrifying way love can sometimes appear in the most unexpected forms. I told him I was afraid. Not of him, but of what this said about me. About the kind of woman I was becoming. He told me I was brave. That what he felt had nothing to do with childhood or obligation, and everything to do with the woman he saw now. The woman I had let him see. "I love you," he said, without flinching. "I love you too," I whispered, my voice catching. "But I don't know if we're allowed to mean it the same way." "Maybe not," he said, eyes steady. "But we do. The world hasn't noticed. And maybe it never will. To them, we're just a mother and son. Two artists. Two quiet souls who live in a house filled with paintings and long walks and laughter. But in the quiet corners of our lives, between the brushstrokes and the silences, something forbidden blooms. Not destructive. Not shameful. just impossible. And impossibly beautiful. Like a painting too large for the frame, spilling color onto the floor. Like love, where no one thought to look.